Welcome to part 5 of the making of this LS swap kit for Discovery 2. Pleased to say that I've received the corrected parts. And in part 4 we were also designing the engine mounts and we pretty much finalized it. And I'm happy to say we got the parts right here for the engine mount. There's going to be some welding involved, but there's a beefy bend there. Gonna weld this there. Same here. One side is bent, one side welded. We have a reinforcement there. And then this is the other side where we're gonna have our tube bushing welded to this. In addition to that, we got corrected mounts for the air conditioning and power steering. This will correct some of the flexing we were seeing when putting tension on the belt. So I'm going to torque everything down now because I think this is going to be it. Now I'm going to put the flex plate on and do the exact same. Okay, flex plate on, flat side out. Almost forgot. I gotta put a little bit of Loctite on these bolts. Okay. We get to put the engine back in there, bolt the bell housing in, and the flex plate to the torque converter. Alright, we're under the car. We got the engine and transmission mated with 2 bell housing bolts. Now, I noticed something as I was laying down here. Normally, what you would do for the flex plate is you would bolt the flex plate to the torque converter through the starter hole. But I don't think we're going to be able to reach the torque converter bolts far away back there with this modified starter hole that we have. So I think I'm gonna have no other choice but to take this oil pan right back off and get to the flex plate to torque converter holes through there. The thing about still having the lift here is that I can lower the engine as much as I want and get tons of room to access those bell housing bolts. Right, I got all the bell housing bolts in, cranked the engine as high as it can go, and now I'm gonna drop that oil pan that I meticulously installed and torqued to spec and all that, so I can install the torque converter bolts. So I just had a really dumb moment trying to remove the oil pan. All the bolts came out so quick with power tools, and I thought, well, why isn't the oil pan coming down? I was like, why is it giving me so much trouble? Why isn't it dropping since I took all the bolts out? Well, duh, because the adapter plate is bolted to it. The oil pan is part of the bell housing bolt pattern. So, naturally, the adapter plate has bolts that go into the oil pan. One here, and the second one, let's see, line up the line. And the second one there. There. Those bolts have to come out for the oil pan to come out. Man, I wonder if I could design this differently. Yeah, so right now, thinking long term, I think I should modify the adapter plate to remove some of this metal, get it out of the way so that we can access that bolt. And then we don't have to remove the oil pan, although that seems like a possibility too, with just a little bit of trimming here. We got really lucky with a little bit of trimming there and cutting this off. We could get those bolts out actually. We kind of got lucky with how the rover bell housing lines up with things. If I recall, it was pretty hard putting the torque converter bolts through there. It wasn't easy or anything. So it is easier to get the oil pan off. I think my dilemma is, what do I do for today? I think maybe today I just try grinding this. I did it. It wasn't bad at all. I did it on this side too. Right there. I think that in the final version, we're gonna recommend both. I'm gonna have instructions on how to clearance this and this, because I think being able to remove the oil pan is an important maintenance item. So I think that should be possible, especially when it just takes a little bit of grinding. But I will also open up this area of the starter hole so that you can access the bolts from here. So both, I think the answer is both things. Got the oil pan off. So now we have real easy access to torque converter bolt holes. And from here I can even rotate the torque converter to line them up for the first one. At least for the first one. I can line them up like that. Boom. See our crank adapter right there. Looking good. Cool. All 4 torque converter bolts are in. It was really easy to access. I remember going through the starter hole and it being really tricky and really difficult. So honestly, just leaving the oil pan off until the engine's in the vehicle seems like a good idea to me. Also makes it easier to lift the engine over the car to get in, not having the oil pan in the way. All right, last night I buttoned everything up down below. I have the engine sitting on the jack stand in position, and I can at least maybe work on reassembling the engine, putting stuff on top. For starters, I put in the new AC mount. See that? A lot more structure over here too. There's the AC mount. Check it out. I'm gonna loosen the tension. Virtually no warping. Very solid now. Status update. I've got a lot of the wiring done. It really goes quick when you've done this a dozen times. So I want to talk about radiators. We know from the ACE kit that you can use the stock Rover radiator and it sits there and it works fine. And really the only issue with it is the hose comes out from here, it has to go over there, and it comes out pretty close to the air conditioning. Another thing is transmission cooler. You have to, well in my case what I did is I got some AN lines from the transmission and hooked it up to an aftermarket transmission cooler, which I zip tied. I can't remember if I zip tied it to the radiator or the condenser. But anyway, that's fine. Saves money, you just do that and very easy. But instead, how about something like this? This is an LS swap radiator. It is thicker and wider than the stock Rover radiator. The coolant hose comes out on the other side, which is the side we want for the LS. And this is cool. It has a transmission cooler built in with 6AN fittings. So I can hook up those lines I have directly in here, and I don't need a separate transmission cooler. So easy. So I'm gonna try to fit this in there. It's a little bit bigger, and I'm gonna have to custom mount it, but let's see what I can do. So the bottom mount is pretty easy. I 3D printed this out of flexible plastic. This pin goes into a hole on the rail, and then this, well, this is the same on the bottom. This kind of goes like this and basically holds the radiator. I think for retaining the top part, I'm just gonna make some sheet metal aluminum bends. Have it start here and bolt down here, then it goes up diagonally, then bends upwards a little and bolts to this lip. And that'll double as a bit of a shroud. So yeah, I'll show you that when it's done. Meanwhile, all the power steering is in. The hoses are routed very similar to a stock vehicle. For the transmission cooler lines, these are 6AN, but these are flanged fitting, so I had to go get adapters for AN, so I won't be able to hook that up until tomorrow. Most of the wiring's done. For the alternator, since it's the GM alternator on this side, a GM wiring harness expected it to be on this side, so we need to get a little bit of an extension, which you can just buy off the shelf. Nice perk of this setup versus the Ace kit is I was able to fit the Land Rover coolant sensor down there. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, Land Rover coolant sensor to the side of the engine instead of being on the coolant pipe over here. So we'll get more accurate readings. Just having the engine pushed half an inch from the adapter plate and having it pushed that way as far as possible gives us just enough room to put that sensor there. I was just hooking up all the grounds when I realized I didn't provision a location to attach the ground to the alternator bracket. So that's something I might want to do, is add an M8 bolt location for the ground. That'd be nice. So the only thing really missing is to hook up all the coolant hoses before I can start this thing. And for that, I'm gonna need some custom hoses for the radiator. Here we got a 1¼ inch diameter hose. We need it to go this way and turn that way. The lower hose needs to, it's hard to see, but it needs to go up and diagonally. So I'm gonna have to find these a molded hose that fits those two applications. So I plan on using this. This document contains a list of all Gates molded coolant hoses sorted by inner diameter. So starting on row 226 to row 256, we've got hoses that are 1.5 inches in diameter, and then they're sorted by length. So this here is the shortest one, and then it goes up from there. And there's a picture showing you the shape. And you can look it up. You can say, okay, I think that's 20450. That might be the one. So you look it up. 20450. You might have to say Gates. And you can click the first link, O'Reilly, and very often they'll have a 360 view. So you can really take a good look at it and get an idea if that's going to work. For the upper hose, I'm thinking this one. It goes down into the water pump, makes a turn from the radiator. So hopefully this one works out. For the lower hose, I'm thinking this one, because it goes in from the radiator and it goes up and turns. Another status update. Transmission lines are hooked up with their adapters. So transmission cooler lines, that is. Now I got the molded hoses I'm hoping will fit. So upper hose, lower hose. So let's see about the upper hose. I'm hoping this can go like this and like that. This looks very promising. Let's see if it fits. Man, that upper hose, that would be nice, except that it's all up in the alternator's business. If it were more like this way and then a sharper turn, that'd be better, but it's too close to the alternator. For the bottom hose, well, the overall shape was good, but it's a little bit too long in the middle. It goes up too high and kind of overshoots where the water pump is. Close, but not exactly right. So I don't have coolant hoses yet, and I don't have engine mounts yet, but I still want to try and start this and see where we're at. It's not starting, and the M&S lights are flashing, and I think it's because of that stupid crankshaft position sensor. I need to tweak it. We're going to get rid of that, by the way, in a future episode. I forgot to hook up these grounds. You think that might have something to do with it? So it starts and dies immediately. That's progress already. I wonder if it's dying because of the crankshaft position sensor again. That might be the problem area. Let's try that again. As you saw, the engine was humming along happily. So it starts, it's wired properly, everything's good. The only thing I noticed that was a little off was, well, this is my first time testing this accessory belt setup, and this belt seems to be slipping that way and squeaking and rubbing, and I'm not sure why, but maybe it's because this pulley is actually a little loose. So maybe it's a bad pulley, bad tensioner. So could be that. I'll try replacing it. But yeah, it runs. It's fixed. This car has been sitting for a year since the flex plates from the Ace kit broke. So this is me fixing it by building my own kit. Okay, I swapped it out. Let's try that again. So that was a little bit better, but still kind of wiggling and squealing. And visually, it kind of looks to me like the belt is departing that way. Like the alternator is maybe too far that way and needs to be pushed out this way. So pushing the alternator forward actually made it worse, and it started rubbing over there. And I think I know what the actual problem is. The actual problem is, not sure if you're going to be able to see it, but when I put tension on it, the alternator bends down. Same problem we used to have here. And it's the same issue. I'm lacking structure here. This front faceplate is just bending. I need another pin at the bottom, another tube, and to make this faceplate longer and bigger so that I have more structure and this doesn't bend when the belt pulls on it. In other news, I found the upper radiator hose that fits very nice. Right? It has the turns we wanted, even angles down a bit, and doesn't get close to the alternator at all. So yeah, Gates 21534. Okay, shifting gears for a bit. I'm gonna start working on welding up my engine mounts. So I'm working on the ground, and all I have is this 120 volt flux core welder. Definitely underpowered for this 1/4 inch steel, but I'm gonna, I'm just prototyping, so it's okay. I'm just gonna heat up the metal as much as possible, crank this as far as I can, and I'll make it work, at least for a prototype. Rest assured that the production parts will be welded by a professional with actual skills. So there are my welds. This thing warped on me. I'm not sure how I could avoid it, honestly. There's nothing to weld on the back, so I can't balance the heat. So it's all curved now. Well, but that's okay. these to your eyes. This one I managed to warp a lot less by welding a little bit at a time in different areas. Finally, we got to weld the tube side. Step 1 is to weld this M12 bolt into here. And step 2, weld the tube on there. That'll do it. This is how these are put together. There's a bushing and an inner tube. Then these go inside here, and then the bolt goes through it. I'm having a hard time getting this in there because it's just a little too tight. Maybe I should leave like a 1/16 of an inch for margin of error, because yeah, this is going to be hard to wedge it in. And this one's even worse because it warped, so it's actually under 3.5 inches here. I had to grind the tube down a little bit, but I got it in, so it looks something like that. Okay, done. I'm really excited to get them in there because that means I can finally move this car in and out. Got those engine mounts in, number 1 and number 2. Now the first thing I wanted to find out with the engine mounts in is, does the hood close? And unfortunately, I think it's touching the top of the air conditioner pulley right here. It's so unfortunate that it hits right where that rib is. So I may have to move it down like a 1/2 inch or something, because the hood does shut, but it takes a little bit of resistance just because it starts to touch here. So I may need to, in the next iteration of those engine mounts, just lower everything about a 1/2 inch. I think the radiator setup is finally coming along. So I made 2 of these. The design now works this way. So down there's this hole and this hole. That fits right in there. Like that. With this edge that goes over the frame. So we've got 2 of those. Radiator is going to slot in there in those rubber mounts. And I also got this shroud made for it, for the top, and that's what's going to keep it in place like that. So it's in. In the end, this 20450 is the best fitting hose I could find. It's not perfect, it's a bit of a stretch, but it'll work. So the vehicle runs and it moves under its own power. So I think I'm going to end the video here. This has been part 5, and stay tuned for part 6. That's going to be a really cool one because we're going to eliminate the rover crankshaft position sensor, which is something you guys have been asking about a lot. So it's going to get a little bit nerdy and technical and electrical, but if you're interested in how that's done, then make sure you don't miss part 6. See you next time.